Good evening, and welcome to Moonlight Whispers. Tonight, let's leave behind the weight of the world and take a little trip together. Imagine a place where clouds are soft enough to sit on, lanterns bob along in the sky like curious fireflies, and where a train of polished wood and gold glides silently from star to star. Tonight, we're boarding that train, bound for the floating market. So settle in, let the noise fade, and let the story begin. The train to the floating market. It starts with a simple ticket, a piece of parchment folded 3 times, tied with a tiny faded golden string. It arrived in your mailbox one afternoon, unannounced and unrequested, as though it had appeared by magic. You chuckle at the thought, but when you unfold it, the ink shimmers and spells out just 2 words: tonight, midnight. Your eyes widen just a touch, taken aback. You look around, perplexed, wondering softly who could have left you such a mysterious message. But something inside you, a quiet, hopeful something, told you to be ready. So you pack a small bag, your journal, that one pen that never skips, a silk scarf scented faintly of lavender, and a tiny tin of shea butter, because even on magical journeys, you weren't about to be ashy. At 5 minutes to midnight, brimming with quiet anticipation and just a hint of nerves, you left your house. The air was unusually warm and carried the scent of warm honey. Down the familiar street, past the silent houses, until, quite suddenly, the road turned into mist. You look around, half expecting someone else to marvel at the sudden mist as well. Then you narrow your eyes, and there, tucked quietly between 2 sleepy oak trees, sits a tiny station platform. It had a little wooden bench with peeling blue paint, an old brass clock that didn't seem to be ticking, and a sign overhead that simply read, "Departing for elsewhere." Seeing the word elsewhere made you pause, tilt your head, and quietly wonder, well, where might that be? Not a soul was in sight, and though you were a little on edge, you weren't afraid. A gentle hum filled the air, like a lullaby being sung by the night itself. Then you heard it, a soft chime, like wind chimes swaying lazily on a porch, followed by the slow approach of wheels. On what, exactly? There were no tracks, just drifting fog, sparkling faintly as though sprinkled with frosted dew. Through it came the train, carriages of polished mahogany wood, windows glowing amber, trimmed with curling gold designs that seemed to wiggle playfully when you blinked. The doors opened with a tiny sigh. Inside, lanterns swung gently, casting warm pools of light. Plush seats and shade of moss green and velvet rose lined the compartments. A soft voice, you couldn't quite tell if it was spoken or simply appeared in your mind, welcomed you. All aboard for the floating market. Please mind your dreams. Even with a small flutter of hesitation, you stepped inside. As you moved down the aisle to choose your seat, it became clear you weren't alone on this train. The other passengers were a quiet, curious bunch. A girl with hair like spun gold cradled a tiny fox asleep in her lap. An elderly gentleman in a sky blue suit scribbled gently in a journal, glasses perched on the tip of his nose. Across the aisle, two spirits shaped like drifting dandelions murmured to each other in a language of sighs. No one seemed startled by your arrival. They simply smiled with their eyes or gave a slow nod, as if you were always meant to be here. You settled into a window seat. Outside, the night sky stretched wide, with a soft swirl of midnight blue, gold, and lavender. Tiny lanterns drifted past, delicate notes tied to their strings. Floating so softly, they looked like jellyfish waltzing through a moonlight sea. The train glided smoothly through the air. Sometimes it passed low over sleepy towns, where lights glimmered and rose like tiny constellations on the earth. Other times, it rose so high that you felt almost weightless, drifting through tender streams of moonlight. At one point, the train slowed and coasted over a sea of rolling clouds. They parted below you like foamy waves, revealing glimpses of glowing coral reefs floating in midair, tended by graceful, translucent creatures. Every so often, the train would let out a happy little whistle. Not loud, just enough to let the world know it was passing by. After what might have been an hour, or might have been a heartbeat, time moves differently here. The train began to slow. Outside your window, lanterns multiplied, forming a glowing necklace across the sky. Beneath them lay a sprawling collection of floating platforms made of polished driftwood, tied together with thick ropes of soft ivy. Tiny stalls with silk canopies fluttered in the breeze that smelled of clove and wild honey. Musicians played gentle tunes on crystal instruments that shimmered like rain. Floating bridges connected platform to platform, swaying slightly under invisible footsteps. The train eased alongside a long wooden dock, and the doors whispered open. You stepped off and were immediately surrounded by soft murmurs, laughter like wind in tall grass, and the comforting clink of teacups. Stalls offered warm pastries filled with cinnamon apples and spiced pears. A florist, shaped like a gentle bear, wove tiny crowns of moonflowers for shy visitors. A tiny old woman invited you to dip your hands into a bowl of starlight. When you did, it felt cool and tingly, and tiny sparks clung to your skin like affectionate fireflies. At the center of the market stood a great fountain made of petrified wood, where water trickled upwards instead of down. Visitors dropped small paper boats into it, each one bearing a tiny written wish. You found a quiet corner by a stall selling soft scarves dyed with crushed sapphire. The vendor, a kind spirit whose face shifted like watercolor, pressed a tiny packet into your hands. A token for your dreams, they whispered. When you opened it later, nestled inside was a silver pin in the shape of a tiny train, clouds curling beneath its wheels. Smiling softly, you took it away and continued on your strange but wondrous journey around the market. When the lanterns began to dim and the musicians packed away their crystal flutes, you miraculously wandered back to the platform. Quite the miracle, really, since you've never really been good with directions. The train waited, lanterns lit, doors open, as if it had never left. Inside, the same passengers settled once more into their soft seats. The girl with the fox now lay asleep, her head resting on its warm back. The gentleman in the sky blue suit had set aside his journal and simply watched the stars, smiling softly. As the train pulled away, you closed your eyes. The gentle sway, the low hum, and the hush of voices wrapped around you like a lullaby. By the time you awoke, the train was gone, and you were back in your own bed. But on your nightstand, where your lamp sat, was the little silver pin, proof that somewhere out beyond the ordinary world, there was really a train that rode on moonlight in a floating market that waited just for dreamers like you. Thank you for joining me here under the moonlight. If your eyes are still open, I hope your heart feels a little quieter. And if you're dreaming, may your sleep be soft and your spirit be at ease. Until the next whisper, subscribe, and I'll be waiting for you beneath the moonlight. Sweet dreams.